I rise to speak on the government's proposed reforms to rental laws that change the balance in terms of the relationship between tenants and landlords. The proponents of the bill have described it in terms of, I think I quote accurately when I say they said that it will get the balance right, and they talk about fairness. Certainly, fairness and balance is an aspiration to which we all aspire. We take into account the considerations of people who are renters. We take into account the considerations of people who've put their hard-earned money into purchasing property. Many such people in my electorate, sir, as you would be well aware, of particularly people who migrated to Australia in the 1950s and 60s, worked hard through their lives, and is a fact that I'm very well aware of, that many choose to invest in property rather than in shares, if that is something that they're in the capacity to do. Many have based their retirement around such arrangements. And indeed, certainly when we were having the land tax debates a couple of years ago, that was a cohort of people whose interests were very much at the forefront of every member's in the House's considerations at that time. Not always the case anymore, as it appears. The balance right, a balance of laws that are fair for renters and fair for landlords as well, is certainly a desirable outcome. Since the Minister introduced this bill some 10 or 11 days ago, maybe 12, I've had constituents raise some specific issues with me. I'll just briefly read a couple of excerpts, which are not the only letters I received, but a characteristic of a greater number. In the interests of time, I've chosen two which raise different issues, but issues which have been identified by a number with some of the laws. Constituents, I write to you today to explain why it is all too difficult to be a landlord today. At our age, and indicate the constituents are in retirement age, why would we want to rent out our properties with all the changes occurring with the new rental laws and rates and taxes going through the roof? You may ask, but house prices are on the increase. I think house prices will steadily slow down. Furthermore, as a self-funded retiree and not eligible for seniors' healthcare card, I believe the government should force banks to pass on interest rates on a savings account a lot sooner and avoid onerous and inconvenient conditions that suit the banks. I truly believe that this may be a problem as to why there is a shortage of rental properties available in South Australia today. Constituents go on to identify their financial circumstances, the situation that is on top of them in trying to serve the money to live from, and they've identified that they've decided to sell their properties and simplify their lives going forward. Hopefully, somebody may be able to buy their properties who'll be able to live in them, and those families will be great. Certainly for the situation for the tenants that have been looked after by these landlords for many years, their circumstances might be more difficult. A very different case, and I think the member for Hyson highlighted at some extent the challenges that the SACAT has in meeting the needs where there is a difficulty, and it's highlighted by one constituent of mine's circumstances, and I'll quote again from their correspondence. Writing in regards to my opinion about the new proposed laws for tenants and landlords. Firstly, I want to share my true experience with you. After 5 years of hard work, I bought my first house in 2021. However, I could not afford the mortgage. So me and my wife decided to live with my mother and put our house into the rental market to cover the cost of living. My first tenant was a mother with 3 children, who unfortunately lied to me in the application, which stated that she and her children would be the only people living in the house. She stopped paying the rent after 3 months, took nearly 3 months waiting for a SACAT hearing and another 4 weeks for the bailiff eviction. By the time they left, the house and the garden were totally trashed. Even with landlord insurance, the total loss for me is more than 5 figures, and there is no way to recover it, as the process in Magistrates Court is time-consuming and hopeless if the tenant receives Centrelink payments. What I want to point out is that the current SACAT overwhelming situation is far worse than can be imagined. Change to the current broken law will hurt the landlord harshly. Landlords like me who used hard-working money to buy the property are sitting in a vulnerable situation because of the overloaded SACAT. New laws will only be applied as designed if justice can arrive on time. The circumstances as described there, I'm sure, could have been told as a story from the tenant side as well. Parent, 3 children, potentially a vulnerable situation, very sympathetic story. landlord, hard-working, financially squeezed, interest rates rising like no one has ever seen in my adult lifetime. I don't speak for others in the chamber, sir, but at 44, the first interest rate rises that I experienced as a homeowner started, early last year. And like many families around South Australia, mortgagees are suffering significantly. That includes people who own properties, people who rent them out, whatever their circumstances may be. Often, if single people with homes move in together, they might have a property. They might rent it out. That might be a source of income. It doesn't mean they're alleviated from the challenge of interest rates. A circumstance like this, where a family has identified the cost of meeting the mortgage being so significant that they would move back in with parents and rent it out, they're providing an opportunity for people to rent those premises. Getting the balance right, getting fairness, means understanding there's a challenge from both sides. In seeking to better understand and be informed of views of my constituents, both renters and landlords alike, this week I have been seeking feedback from members of my community, sent an email out, had social media posts, and in the first 24 hours we had more than 300 responses, and certainly in the next couple of weeks as we lead into the debate on this matter in the Legislative Council as well, with a view towards presenting to my party those issues on which we might seek to move amendments potentially or potentially not. I'll continue to take feedback from my constituents. I anticipate, based on the first day and a half, that we'll probably have a very large volume of those. I asked a number of questions and I hope that I've represented the positions relatively fairly. I've taken information directly from the bill, but for the record, I identified the new laws proposed that termination and non-renewal of tenancy agreements, including at the end of a lease, would not be able to see tenants evicted without providing a prescribed reason such as damage to property, illegal behaviour or breach of contract, unless the landlord requires possession to sell, renovate or occupy. Do you support, unsure or oppose, and so forth? Second, I asked new laws proposed if the landlord does require possession as described above, they must provide 60 days notice. When a tenant receives notice their tenancy will not be renewed, they may vacate their rental property with 7 days notice within that 60-day period and not be liable to pay rent after they vacate. Do you support, oppose or other? The new laws propose that tenants can apply to keep a pet on the premises. Landlords may require certain conditions, such as that the dwelling be cleaned to a professional standard at the end of the tenancy, but grounds for refusal are otherwise quite limited. The fourth matter was the new laws proposed that the landlord or agent may inspect the premises no more than 4 times a year. Current provisions allow an inspection as many times as once every 4 weeks. The fifth is that the bill will clarify that a landlord or agent must not unreasonably withhold consent for a tenant to sublet a property. These provisions also specify that a landlord or agent must not charge a fee for giving consent to a tenant to sublet the property. In relation to all of these, I haven't reflected on the early feedback from my community because it's early. I will make an exception in this case. The early responses from the first 300 respondents suggest that this is a particular concern over and above some of the others, but I'll certainly be happy to put on the record later, and certainly for my constituents, the final numbers prior to this bill being in the Legco. Finally, the bill will require that rent increases not be disproportionate, in quotes, with tenants able to make application to SACAT if they consider an increase to be excessive on this basis. Those are 6 of the issues that were particularly identified to me by constituents as being of concern in some areas. Some people are very supportive of them as well. Certainly I seek to serve my constituents by being informed by my constituents and raise in this place issues that they bring to my attention. I do so on this occasion. I've been grateful to those constituents who have reached out to share their concerns. I'm grateful to those constituents who have invested in the future of South Australia through providing housing opportunities to people who are their tenants, and I'm grateful to those people who are renting in my community and adding to the community as they do every day. I look forward to the further consideration of this bill in the House and the committee stage, looking in some detail some of these matters, and I'm confident that as we approach the Legislative Council, I'll be able to pass on the views of my constituents, including the hundreds who have already responded to my office and the hundreds more who I expect will in the coming days, to ensure that their views are taken into consideration in what the Liberal Party puts forward.